All right, all right. Welcome, everybody. So today we are going to, it's going to be a quick stream, probably about 30 minutes, 45 minutes, not going to be too long. Today I'm going to be working on something that I've actually been thinking about for a long time. And it's a little open source project that I wanted to make because there's a lot of things that kind of look like it that are out there, but none that I really like. And so this was something I really wanted to put out there. So it uses React and MobX. I'm using React and MobX for my state management in my React applications. So you might have heard of Redux as a state management system, or it's actually Redux is both a library and it's also kind of a mindset. It's an architectural pattern of managing state in React applications. And then the alternative, or one of the major alternatives to Redux, in addition to just regular state management using like React hooks or some of the stuff built into React, is a library called MobX. And so MobX itself is actually it's a state management library for JavaScript, and it actually has nothing to do specifically with React. MobX itself is actually the underlying validation or state management library where you basically make observables. And so if you're familiar with RxJS or observables in say .NET or those other languages where when you modify a property or an object, you get an event, you get a notification that value has changed, and then you can react to it, right? So it's more of an event-driven system or an event-driven architecture where you react to changes. Um, and so there's MobX, that's the state management library, and then there is MobX React or MobX React Lite, kind of a lighter weight version of MobX React, and that's what actually brings it into React. That's what brings MobX into React. So that has very basic kind of helper utilities where you can wrap React components to basically react to MobX observables. So whenever you create a model and then you change that model, React automatically re-renders the thing that's displaying that model, and you're all set, right? So that's kind of the ecosystem. So for me, my problem has always been forms, and I'll show you what I mean. So here's a basic form. This is just a stupid form, and it's literally I copied and pasted the markup from the Bootstrap examples, right? So this is all just using Bootstrap JS, and then the code behind this form is this. So it's a basic MobX state management system here. So in MobX, you will make something called stores. This is basically just an object or a class of which you get an instance of that manages all of the state for your page, right? So you can use the term store or state pretty much interchangeably. The store is the state for your component, right? So this is my page. This is my React component, which kind of represents my page. And then I've got my store has my state. So if I jump in here, it's just a class with observables, right? So that's a JavaScript decorator, and that comes from the MobX library. So basically, by decorating these properties, you're saying anytime these properties change or the value of these properties change, trigger up an event to notify subscribers that it changed, right? So I actually have a couple more stores in here. So this is my kind of store which manages the whole page. And then if you dig in, I chopped it up into additional classes. So here's a class that's closer to like an entity or something. It's a class that has properties, right? So a billing address, first name, last name. You could ignore this validation stuff for now. I'll get back to it. Probably not in this stream, but in the next one, I'll get back to validation. This is a library that I've been playing with, Class Validator, so it actually has nothing to do with MobX. It's really just like a TypeScript way or a decorator-based way of doing validation. Just ignore all this. What is relevant today are these observables, right? So we have observable properties, first name, last name, username, address, and all of that stuff. Same thing. Can we go back? Same thing here on this payment method, right? Same thing. I just got a bunch of observable properties: credit card number, expiration month, right? Oh, that's the same page. Yeah. So there's that, right? So it's all pretty basic, straightforward. So that's MobX. That's the extent of MobX, is that basically I have these objects. I get instances of objects. Whenever I change those objects, React will re-render this component. It's pretty much what we're doing here, right? So that's kind of the 5-minute overview or intro to MobX and React. Now when we look to actually kind of using these things in a form, let's look at this. So this is the redeem promo code right here. That's this input over here. And then I also have 2 form inputs here that I've wired up already, right? This one, the first name and the last name. So this is the basic pattern. Again, this is just pure React, right? So in React, you assign the value. So in this case, it's the value of the promo code property. That's the value of the input. And then whenever that value changes, you take that event, you take that value, the current value or the new value of that input field by saying in eTarget value. And then here I'm just assigning it. I'm updating the value of my model, right? And so by doing this, this is where the magic of MobX comes in. MobX will listen to this, re-render the whole page. Everything's good. But if we look at this, so I've got, promo code, or let's call this promo code, right? I've got a lot of, if I move this down here, I've got a lot of duplicated code here. This is all kind of boilerplate code, right? Input, type text, name, value, on change. More importantly, we want to keep these in sync, right? The promo code. So whatever value I'm displaying here, I want to make sure that that's the value I'm updating when I change it. I don't want to accidentally do this, right? I'm just kind of picking a random thing here, but the billing address, whatever. I don't want to accidentally update that when I change the promo code. I want to guarantee or make sure that these things are in sync. And by the way, also set the name on there too and keep that in sync. So that should be the property. So just by clicking it in Visual Studio Code and seeing what's highlighted, I can see this. I want all of these to stay the same. So this is very boilerplate, right? So I go down to my next one down here. Same deal. Same exact deal. Boilerplate code. On these, I also put a component which I'll build out later, validation message. Like I said, don't worry about validation here. Just know that it takes these validation errors and looks through them and prints them out. So basically, print any validation errors that are relevant to the first name property. And again, when I highlight first name, you can see Visual Studio Code highlights all the references to it. So ideally, I want to make sure that all of these are the same, or at the very least, I don't want to, when I'm using strings, this just takes a string, I don't want to misspell it, right? It's very difficult to track down. I get some, because this is just JavaScript, I do get some TypeScript feedback here, so it's difficult to misspell here. So here, I'm more concerned about doing that, this is the value that I'm binding to, and this is the value that I accidentally update because I copied and pasted it or something like that. So that's what I want to fix. So that's what we'll do today. So we'll kind of begin the basics of this open source library really just by solving the problem in this demo application. And then over time, over the next couple of sessions, we'll kind of move that out into its own open source library. So I'm going to start by creating a new component called bound input. Bound input. Import React from React. Export const bound input. Just kind of put something in there for now. Doesn't matter what. All right, and then I'm also, again, you don't really have to worry about this right now. I'm just going to do this. I'm going to wire up observer. I'm going to wire up the MobX React stuff, just so basically any time that the value is changed, if there's an observable that is happening here, the component gets re-rendered. It's pretty much all that happens there. Okay, so now bound input. What I want to end up here is, let's define the interface. Bound input props. So I want to be able to, what's my input? So I'm taking this whole thing, and so I want to be able to pass in the model that I want to kind of take the value of, and the name of the property that I want to bind to, right? So let's just copy this, put it over here, and I want this to happen. I want this to be the property, and this is going to be the model, and the property on the model, and then update that, right? So this is kind of the pseudocode that I'm looking for. So the property is going to be, or rather the model is going to be, let's just say object. It's going to be pretty much anything. And then the property is going to be a string. So this is just very basic, and this is what we're going to elaborate on in this session. This is very, very basic type checking, right? So give me any object for the model and give me any string for the property. Now I'm going to add some value guards later, some type guards later, to actually narrow this down, because what this really wants to be is the only the valid properties of the model that I pass in, right? So I'll add some generics and cool stuff later, but for now, let's just make this work. And then we'll get into the TypeScript part of it. Okay, so now it's yelling at me. Element implicitly has any type because string can't be used to index type. Yeah, well, right. So that's the problem I was just talking about, right? So basically this is saying that you can't just have any string here, because I don't know if any string is actually a valid property on model. That's fine. So we'll just, for now, cast this as any, because we will come back and we'll fix that problem. But just kind of to get this to compile and work, we'll do this. Let's remove the placeholder required. I'll leave the bootstrap stuff on here for right now. We'll limit it to text for right now. We'll eventually expand this out. But this is a pretty good template that I got here. All right. So now let's go back, and instead of this, let's say bound input model equals store.billing address, and property equals. So here's what I eventually want, is I want to have like autocomplete, right? And only have the properties of billing address to actually to pick from here. But we'll get to that. So for now, we're just going to use a string. So we'll say first name. That should be good. And let's just do this one. Why not? Let's just go for it. Do both of them. All right. So this is first name. This is last name. Okay. Now if we save this and we go back to the React app, this should reload and it should still work. And I know that it works just because when I type it updates, right? Because if it didn't, when I type, nothing would happen, right? So I know that this works because it does something. So this is actually a little more interesting than you would expect, right? So what's happening here is I made this component that is dynamically defined, right? So I say, give me this model and create a text box that is based on the property of first name on this model, right? And so kind of dynamically, I'm extracting the value, and whenever it changes, it updates. And by it, I mean that's all the magic of MobX and Observer, MobX React and everything. That's handling all that magic, so I'm not doing any of that. And then whenever I type in it, whenever I change the value, I update the value of that property and I set it. So this is just one basic use case. This is mostly for like text input and stuff where it's very simple. Obviously, as we get more involved and we kind of apply this pattern a little bit broader, we're going to have to deal with text boxes and radio buttons and all of that stuff, but we'll get there. Let's just start with this. So now let's do this. Let me make another copy. I'll just bring this down here for username. No, we'll not do username. Let's do the promo code that we had up here. Yeah, promo code. Oh, actually, let's get back to this because this is super easy. So my promo code has autocomplete. As we saw before, this had required and stuff. Let's allow this to be. Let's extend. What is it? Let's see. Let's allow passing in the props for the input text field. So this is going to be React detailed props HTML element. Whoops. Let's see. Which one do I just want to do this? Oh, I don't want to do and. I want to do extends. There we go. Cool. So what we're saying is we're going to take in all of our the properties that we're defining here, and we're also extending the input element properties. So all of these are now good, right? So if I go back, I should be able to say things like required with full IntelliSense and everything. Read only, required. And in order to make this work, I will just use the rest operator to get the rest of the props and whoops, whoa, hello. Write them out, pass them on to the input. So there we go. So I can even put in class names and everything. I'll leave this on here for now because that'll actually break. But we can pass through styles, class names, all of that stuff. So there we go. So we should also be able to pass in the autocomplete here. So I'll copy this, paste here. My model now is just store. I'm not looking at the billing address. I'm looking at the store. And my value or my property is promo code. And so that takes care of these things. My placeholder is promo code. It is not required. Oops. Placeholder promo code. Autocomplete off. There we go. Cool. All right, and I can still use the append and all that stuff, or at least I should be able to, because it's just a text field. So now if I refresh, this should still be good. Let's see if it works. Test. Yep, so all of that still works. So this is super cool. All right, but now let's say property, promo code. Let's say I misspell this. Prom code. Right? Now I enter a prom code. Prom code is not a valid property on the model. It should be promo code. Now, if I did this prom code with TypeScript, then the magic of TypeScript would give me an error. This is not a valid property. Did you mean promo code? It even gives me suggestions of, did you actually mean this, right? So if I were doing that in TypeScript, I'd get that error. What I would really love is to get that error here. So let's see if we can make that happen. So now we have to deal with some generics. So we'll introduce a generic called tModel. So model is of type tModel. And then property is no longer strings. It is a key of tModel. Now, let's see. The key of tModel is not assignable. The types property and property are incompatible. Okay, so this is yelling at me that this thing that I'm extending actually already has one. It has a property called property, and it's a type string, which is why it wasn't yelling at me before because it was cool. But now since I'm changing the type of that, I have to extend this one or remove this one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the omit utility type here. Omit from this type property. So I'm going to use my own property. And then that error goes away. Okay, so now we have a new error. Generic type requires one type argument. Sure it does. Pass that in. So we can't just do it there. It needs to be defined somewhere, which means it needs to be defined here. And let's say it extends object. Okay. Name. Type number. Okay. So, I think this is part of it. Here we go. Let's see. String is not assignable to type. Okay. All right. Model. What's going on here? Let's let me reload. Let me reload. Kick TypeScript up and see if TypeScript's complaining or what. Give TypeScript a minute. Oh, sure. Okay, so my model is an object. Now, type string is not assignable to type never, so that's odd. Let's see. The expected type comes from property, which is declared here. Property is key of model. Let's say model, excuse me, extends object. Does that help? What if I define? I don't think I need to define that. All right. Let's say record. Record string any. How about that? So this is saying the record is another utility type or TypeScript type that basically describes an object, and it says that all of the object's properties need to be string, and their values can be anything. So now when I say key of tModel, they should be a string. I should limit the strings. So why is this not working? Okay, no errors over here, but it's still not working. So this should be, okay, key of tModel. So what is going on here? I think we don't need this any anymore. Yep, okay. So now that used to be an error. Key of tModel string. Why is property a string? That's very weird. Why does it think it's a string? What if I save this and reload? I think I got an error. Yeah. Oh, no. Whoa. Interesting. Totally broken, huh? That's interesting. Oh, because I reloaded the window, yeah. I reloaded my build. Start that up again. Okay, all right. Key of tModel is not assignable to type string or undefined. Cool, okay. That's this guy. Class name property. Oh, that's this guy. Let's just say as string. There we go. Cool. Okay. So it's still working, so that's good. So functionally it works. It's good. We only added type information. We didn't actually change the way it was implemented. But this should be yelling at me, right? So what our goal here is that this is a model. It knows this is tModel, right? Checkout page store is the tModel that is being passed in here. What if I say equals. So what is going on here? Let's see. Reveal in the sidebar. Oh, not the sidebar. Split to the right. There we go. All right, let's take a look at this side by side here. Okay. So what we want is red squigglies under here. And this should work, and I'm not sure why it's not. So while we're doing that, actually, let me, just to simplify things, let's just take this out real quick. We'll get back and we'll add that later. That's gonna yell at me there, but let's just deal with this for right now. Required, there we go. So let's just get this working and then we can go back and re-implement that. I don't think that's going to make any difference to what we just did because we still want to see a red squiggly here and we are not seeing it. Okay, so what do we need to do here? So this is property key of. So I don't think I want to do type of key of. That's the wrong thing. Yeah, that's not going to work. I do this. I want key of T model. So what this should resolve to. Here, let me show you. Let's see. Export. So if I just had a class here or a function here. So if I import this some function here, and I just called this. This is not. Oh, I got to pull it in, of course. There we go. So I should get name. Okay, so this works, right? This is exactly what it was supposed to do. So let's talk about why this works. And then we'll figure out why the React one doesn't work. Okay, so when I have something like this, I can actually simplify it down even further. We don't even need name and property. We can just, when I pass in a T, I'll just do this all right here so we can see it in action. Okay, T model. Key of T model. This is how it's supposed to work. So I don't need to specify a type for T model when I call it because it is inferred by the model that I'm passing in, right? So we can see type some function, TypeScript just figures out this is the model. And then I have full IntelliSense. I have autocomplete there where I can say the only properties, because the only keys of tModel is name. So that's the only values that I can pass in here. If I pass in nom, name without an E, it's not valid. Argument of type nom is not a citable to parameter of type name, right? So it's saying the only thing we can do is name here. And so if I say name ID equals 1, then the options that we have expands to include those properties, right? So now, why isn't this working? So this is basically what I'm doing right here, but it's not working. What if I make it a function? Does that matter? So when I'm using TypeScript in here with JSX, it gets a little weird because it doesn't really know if this is an HTML blob or something else. So what if I make it a function instead, which should make it clear that this is a generic parameter and not an HTML element. All right, there we go. So value model property, okay. tModel, tProperty. Okay, so this should be good. And then I lost my observer for now, but that's fine. I'll come back and get it. Let me just comment that out now so TypeScript doesn't yell at me. So if I remove this, let's go back and see if this has just worked because I changed it to a function. I highly doubt it, but maybe. There it is. Cool. Right. So that was just a confusion of TypeScript and JSX and HTML and all of that stuff. So when I turned it into a function, it was very clear that tModel was a generic constraint versus a random HTML element. And now we can see what I was looking for this whole time, right? So we can see when I pass in the model, the store object has these properties on it. And so when I have these, it should actually give me a compile time error if the value of this string, even though it is a string value, the valid values of this prop are only the property names on the store, right? So when I say promo code, everything's happy. If I say promo cod, nope, not happy. It's actually a compile time, and it actually gives me the autocomplete there to do the right thing. So what is this error now? Let's see. Why is this yelling? So we're back to saying over here, basically, I can't, which is declared, property value. Yeah. So value needs a string, I think, is pretty much what all this is saying. It either needs a string or, let me see, I can dive right into it. Yeah, it needs a string, an array of strings, or a number. And because of the generic, there are no constraints on this. I can't guarantee that this is going to be a string value. And so that's why TypeScript is yelling at me. Let's see if I save this, if TypeScript will continue to let me use it. No, I got to fix this. Okay, so this is a true complaint, right? So according to React, the only valid values of a value property are strings, array of strings, or numbers. And I have not put any constraints on this tModel to make sure that those are the only valid values that can be passed into value. Moreover, I don't really want to limit myself, right? Like ideally, I want this class, this component, the bound input component, I want it to be able to deal with complex objects. Right? I want to be able to bind those properties. I want to be able to bind, forget about complex objects for right now, because that's a different story. But things like Boolean, things that are other than strings and numbers. So I got two options here. I can convert the value to string, which probably don't want to do that, but I could do that. And then obviously I'd have to kind of convert it back here. So whatever I do, basically serializing up here, I'd have to deserialize it when you bring it back in here, right? So I want to kind of avoid that. Or I can say model extends record string, and then the only, so strings are just the property names, can only be strings, and the only thing that I will accept here are strings, string arrays, or numbers. When I add that in place, it gets rid of this error, right? Because now I've limited it to make sure that the, as you can see, right, now that that error goes away, now I can actually see what it was complaining about. These are the valid values or valid types that the value property can accept: string, number, array of strings, or undefined. Now that I've limited it to say the object that I want to pass in, all of its properties must be one of these things, that error goes away. Obviously, that's not what I want. Right? That fixes this problem, the type problem. That's obviously not what I want, because now I get a different error. This is saying, hey, you're trying to pass in a T model that has some properties that aren't strings, string arrays, or numbers, right? Which, yes, of course. I have things that are functions, I have things that are properties, and all of that, right? So I don't want to do that. So I could restrict the value of property. Let's do that. Let's look at this. Let's see how that would work. So now I'll add in tprop extends key of tmodel, and tprop is limited to let's see. Tprop. Okay, and then tprop value extends key of, let's see, the type of tprop is tmodel. Okay. So this is, I'm adding another value here, and this is extracting the actual value of the thing that was passed in. Right? So this says that now we're looking at this. So tprop, it makes a whole lot more sense if I add it here. So this is just refactoring this, right? And then tprop value extends tmodel tprop. So now I got the value. Now I have the actual type. I guess this would be tprop type. Now I get the actual type of this. So now how would I use this? The more important thing is how would I be able to constrain this, which I actually don't know off the top of my head. But that's just, I wanted to show you that just because that is kind of, that is a feature of TypeScript that you can do this. This is legal TypeScript, right? So I've been using tprop like I've shown, which is to get the valid, it restricts the value of the property value to only the keys on model. And then I can further say tprop type extends the actual value of tprop, right? So in this case, it's kind of 2 layers. It's like Inception, right? It's like 2 layers of typing. So now I can say this list is constrained to just the names, the values on store. And then since promo code is a string, promo code is a string, then tprop type in this case would be string. If I did billing address, then tprop type in this case would be billing address, right? So you could actually extract that and kind of do stuff with it. Off the top of my head, I don't know. I want to add another layer of constraints, which off the top of my head, I don't really know how to do. So I'm just going to undo all of this stuff. There we go. Go back to this, which worked. Okay, cool. All right. So we're still back to the original problem of how do I deal with this, right? This only accepts strings, arrays of strings, or numbers. So how do I restrict that? The simple answer is I don't, but that's an awful answer. I think I can get rid of this now too. Yes, no, what's the problem there? String is not assignable. Sure it is. Oh, right, same error. Same error, right? It's what I said before. Value is going to be string, and this needs to be string. So let's do this. Let's add converter. Let's say formatter. Basically, I want to say parse it in, parse it, the parser for the value coming in, and then the parser to. Basically, we need a type value parser, right? So something that takes the value of property on model and parses it to a string, and then coming back out. When we have a string, parse it back into the value that we want to assign, right? So let's call that formatter. And as a matter of fact, we'll say, we'll put that tprop back on so we can reuse it. Tprop extends key of model, not model, but tmodel. And yeah. So key is, no, sorry, I'm kind of losing my mind here. So the value, so format the value is going to be, yeah, it's going to be prop. Sorry, oh geez. Tprop extends key of tmodel. So this is going to be tprop. The value is going to be tprop. And it's going to result in a string. Then we need the other way around. Parser. Value string. And that comes back out to this. Okay, so let's talk about what we just did here. I reintroduced that thing that I've been threatening to reintroduce the whole time. So the reason I brought this up into here is because I wanted to refer to it multiple times, right? So now whenever I enter that magic property here, well, it's broken right now, but let's get back to that. Now when I enter that magic property, that value, in this case promo code, is going to be the thing that I'm referring to all over the place, particularly in here. So then I'm using that trick of, okay, so what's the type of promo code, right? What's the type of that property on that model? That's what this is doing here. So now the reason it's yelling at me is because I didn't pass this on. So I just need to pass that on. Not there, but there. Okay. Good. Let's see. Are we good over here? Yes, we're good. We're back to good over here, right? So now, let me go back and show you what I was talking about. Now we offer the ability to give optional parsers. So we got formatter is a method that takes in the value and does a string. So we'll just do that. Very simple, stupid. But look, if I hover over this, we can see it's string. Where did string value come from? Well, string is the type of tmodel tprop. In other words, it is the type of store promo code, right? If I change this to the a function on here, which you would never do, but now this is function. It's a function that returns a promise void, right? So this is the I mean this is super TypeScript, right? This is the value of TypeScript where I'm actually like validating string values, limiting the list of string values to only the things that are on this object, and then actually taking the type of that property of the string value and doing something with it. Super, super cool. So then we'll do formatter, and then on the way out we will parse. So this is the string value, right? And then we need to parse it back out to, well, in this case, it's just a string. So in this case, I actually don't need to do anything at all, right? So this is just a pass through. Because I'm passing in a string, I'm taking out a string, I don't need anything. And so that's, in fact, formatter, parser, formatter, or and then parse, parser, sure. Just pass that in. There we go. Okay. So now I can format going in, and I can parse going out. As tprop. As tmodel. Tprop. As any. There we go. All right, let me move that over so we can see what's going on here. Okay, so I have to go through this mess because basically what I'm doing is I'm making a default parser. So I'm just saying, well, I know it's a string, but I can't just say it's a string. I actually have to kind of convert it and make it happy. So basically what this results to is it's a string. I'm just passing it in, I'm just making sure it's a string. So this is one of those things where I'm opting out, right? Like I'm not taking full use of TypeScript because I'm using any and I'm kind of making assumptions and everything. So we can deal with that in a future stream, but this should work. And in fact, more importantly, I should be able to remove these now. I should be able to, this should work, right? Billing address, these, so the name, first name and promo code should still be working. Let me save all. Let me go back here, refresh, everything's good. And if I type, it doesn't work. What did I break? Let's see. Hold on, let me take this back out. And oh, it doesn't work because I had to take off that observer. All right. Remember when I took this off, what's going on here? Oh, because I need to pass in those T models. Remember when I took this off before because TypeScript was getting confused. Let's see. And now it's getting upset that I don't have these T, so I'm just going to copy these, I think. Where do I need to put it? That is the error, right? Let's see. Argument of tprops is not assignable to function. Oh, interesting. All right, well, I'm just going to, just for now, I'm going to get rid of that. So there's a lot of as any, right? But I'm breaking all the rules. I'll go and clean these up. I hate as any, by the way. I would never do this. Certainly not into production code, but this is kind of a work in progress. We're moving in the right direction. So now that we've wrapped it in an observer, now this should work. Let's see. Type model does not exist. Oh, because I got rid of okay. Let's do this. Export, and I think I want to say observer is the other way to do this. I think this will work as well. Let's see. Okay, let's see if this works. Yeah, that works. Okay, so that was just a MobX, React MobX thing. You don't have to worry about any of it. That did not have any effect on the T-model, T-prop stuff that we were doing. But since we did that, can we go back here? Format. Will this work now? I think it will. I think that was the problem. Parse. Okay, now I got rid of those any's. Does this work? It does. It does. Cool. So, like I said, don't ever say any. Figure out a better way to do it, because that usually means that TypeScript is trying to help you and you're ignoring it. Don't ignore that help. So we're good. We are well on our way to having a bound input component, right? So now it still works. So let's go back and add that thing back in the extends. What was it? It was, give me an input field here that I can dig into. Extends that. But let's make a type input props equals omit, and I'm going to be overwriting there we go. Cool. I can also do this. Rather than extending, I can do input props. Just add it on down here, right? Because it actually has nothing to do with my actual props that I'm defining. I'm just passing them through. So I'll take that, and then I will pass them through. And now I should be able to, with full type support, go back here and add required. Right. What else? Autocomplete off. Oops, not that one. This one. And where's my promo code? There we go. There you go. It's not required, but autocomplete is off. So there we go. I've got the full IntelliSense and typing of the underlying bound input. So just to prove that it still works, good. If I remove it and try and submit the form, I get required. Right? That's the basic browser functionality, right? That's not any of the validation stuff that I have. So that's that. That is a bound input component using TypeScript. So in the next stream, I'm going to take this even further. I'm going to expand it to basically bind to any component. So right now I'm kind of hard coding the input component in here. I'll extract this out so you can pass in your input component. You can wrap another component, do all kinds of cool stuff, right? So until then, thank you for joining. Hope you got something out of this, and I'll see you next time.